My mother-in-law showed up with forged documents saying the flat was hers on my first day there, despite the fact that my parents had left me a $100 million penthouse. She gave me a severe smack, tossed me in a car, and abandoned me at a far-off bridge, ordering me to go to hell after I tore them up. She was completely astonished by what transpired after I returned prepared for vengeance, despite barely surviving. I never in a million years thought my life would change so drastically. The inheritance was the first step. A terrible accident claimed the lives of my parents, whom had always been the pillars of my existence. It was difficult to comprehend, and in the midst of my sorrow, I was presented with the most surprising gift, a $100 million penthouse condominium in the center of New York City. I recall my hands shaking as I walked over the glossy surfaces of the penthouse for the first time following the burial. I could see the skyline for miles in front of me. This property now felt like a great burden because it had so many memories of my early years. It was home, not just a house. My parents had brought me up there, and it had seen my development, aspirations, and setbacks. It was mine now, but I didn't know how to keep it, not only physically, but emotionally. I was overcome with sorrow. And then there was my spouse, Daniel. The one person I believed I could rely on when I was at my lowest. I believed that Daniel, a 32-year-old marketing executive, had always been encouraging. After 3 years of marriage, I had dreamed of us creating a life together, sharing this house, and claiming it as our own. As a child, this penthouse had always seemed unattainable, but my aim was to transform it into a cozy and inviting place. My mind was filled with anticipation at the prospect of furnishing each room, painting the walls in hues that would evoke our memories, and eventually hearing kids giggling. However, things took a turn. Daniel's sister Claire and mother Eva started to express a strong interest in the penthouse. I initially believed it to be innocuous. When they talked about how excited they were about the inheritance, I figured they were just pleased for us. However, it soon became apparent that their desire was not as pure as it first appeared to be. I began to feel uncomfortable around them, as if something was changing and they were more concerned with the property than with my welfare. I was sitting near the wide windows overlooking the city in the living room one day. In an attempt to calm myself and find a way to proceed, I started drafting some ideas for remodeling the penthouse. I briefly allowed myself to think that this place may once again be a home because of the ideal lighting. I looked up to see Eva and Claire standing there as the door crashed open. Their faces were stern and inhospitable. Eva's harsh, demanding voice said, "Carrara, we need to talk." As I got to my feet, a chill went through me. A feeling of fear crept in, and my heart started to speed. What was the purpose of this? This was the first time they had ever stormed into our house. Claire's face was twisted in a way that was halfway between a grin and a sneer, and Eva's eyes were cold. They were carrying papers, and I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. "What's going on?" I tried to sound calm as I asked, but I was already starting to feel nervous. Eva took a while to respond. Rather, she thrust the documents into my grasp. They were official documents with a polished appearance. I looked at them, glancing over the text, but my feelings grew worse as I read more. I felt sick to my stomach. The records were more than just bills or property tax filings. These were fictitious legal documents claiming that Daniel's family owned the penthouse. It was impossible to ignore the words, which felt like they were hitting me in the face. "What is this?" I gazed up at them and made a trembling demand. "You can't just say this house belongs to you." Eva crossed her arms and grinned. "Carrara, it's true. These documents indicate that Daniel's family is now the owner of this apartment. You must leave." I looked to Daniel in the hopes, no, in the prayers, that he would speak up and put an end to this lunacy. Instead, he stood there as if he were a stranger in the room with us, his arms folded, his face expressionless. My heart fell. I pleaded, "Daniel, please," as I reached out to him, my voice breaking. "Please let me know if this is an error. Say something, please." However, he didn't. He simply stood motionless and icy. There was no sign of the man I had married and loved. He seemed to have vanished, to have been replaced by an unfamiliar person. Daniel, desperate, I asked again, "Please tell me you don't believe this." As she drew closer, Eva's remarks were laced with fake sorrow. "This is best for you, Kara. This residence is not necessary for you. This load is unnecessary for you. Let us deal with it." A wave of rage swept over me. After all my parents had created, I couldn't allow them to take it all away. I had dreams about this place, but not anymore. The last remnant of my family I had was this penthouse, which was brimming with memories. They were now attempting to tear it from me. "This is my home." My voice rose in exasperation as I yelled. "I'll let you take it." Before I knew what was happening, Eva slapped me across the face. The jolt I experienced was far worse than the sting of her hand on my cheek. With my head whirling, I staggered backward. No one, much less a member of my husband's family, has ever struck me so severely. I was devastated and felt deceived. The woman who had once been welcome to me, the woman I believed to be family, had just hit me. Enough. Emboldened by her mother's aggression, Claire yelled, "Leave this place. We own this place." I couldn't move. As a result of the anguish, betrayal, and bewilderment, they began to seize my personal items, sketches, and whatever else they could find and threw them out the door. I stared in disbelief as my life was thrown onto the street as if it were unimportant. "Leave now." Daniel's mother gave a stern, decisive snarl. Heartbroken, I turned to Daniel one last time. I pleaded, "Please help me. Please don't let them do this." However, Daniel remained silent and avoided looking into my eyes as he stood there. Then I came to that realization. I no longer had anyone. They pushed me into a car and drove me away from my former home in and out of the city. The chilly air stung my face when they abandoned me at a far bridge. Eva spat, "Go to hell, Kara," and slammed the car door. Alone, heartbroken, and deceived by the person I trusted most in the world, there I was. As I stood by myself on the bridge, the sounds of the automobile rushing away reverberated in my ears, and the cold air slapped my face. I could hardly stand because my knees felt weak. I never imagined that I would end up in this predicament. My own husband left me and threw me away as if I didn't exist. There was nothing but silence as I gazed down at the deserted street. The city I used to adore suddenly seemed so far away, so alien. How had it all gone so badly? I couldn't tell how long I stood there, attempting to put the broken pieces of my life back together while gazing into emptiness. However, I sensed a tiny, hardly perceptible flame flickering inside of me somewhere in that darkness. It wasn't a loss. When I first became aware of what was happening, I wasn't overcome with despair. No, there was more to this spark. It was anger. It was determination. They had taken everything from me, my home, my belongings, my dignity. But they hadn't taken my will to fight. I wasn't going to let them in. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I was done feeling like a victim. I was done being passive. I managed to make my way back to the city, feeling the weight of every step, but knowing that I had to keep moving. I didn't know where to go or what to do, but I knew I couldn't go back to that penthouse, not after what had happened. The place that had once felt like home now felt like a prison, haunted by betrayal. The first thing I did was reach out to someone I trusted, Ethan. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was an old college classmate. We had lost touch over the years, but when I needed someone, I remembered him. He was smart, dependable, and had become a successful lawyer. I didn't know where to start, but I knew that he could help me. When I called him, I could hear the concern in his voice even before I explained what had happened. "Kara, what's going on? You sound like you've been through hell." And I had, but there was no time to dwell on the past. I needed to focus on what came next. I told him everything. The inheritance, the documents, how Daniel's family had forced me out of the penthouse, and how Daniel had stood by silent, letting it happen. He listened patiently and then said something that gave me hope. You're not alone in this, Kara. You have the right to fight for your home, your life. We can prove that those documents are fake. We'll take them to court. It was the first time since everything fell apart that I felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan was on my side. He believed in me, and that was all I needed to hear. We set to work quickly. I gathered every document I could find. My parents' will, the deed to the penthouse, and anything else that proved I was the rightful owner. I even made notes about what happened on that day when Daniel's family barged in and forced me out. Every detail was important. I knew they were trying to take everything from me, but I wasn't going to let them. It was hard, emotionally, physically, mentally. Each day was a battle as I tried to pick up the pieces of my life, and each new document I uncovered only fueled my anger. Daniel's silence still haunted me. How could he just stand there, letting his family tear my world apart? It was like he wasn't the man I had married. I couldn't make sense of it, and I didn't know if I ever would. I knew I had to file for divorce. As painful as it was, there was no way I could continue living with a man who had betrayed me so completely. I wasn't going to share a life with someone who allowed this to happen. It hurt more than I can say, but it was the right choice. I needed to sever all ties with him and take control of my life again. As Ethan worked on the legal paperwork, I focused on getting stronger, mentally, emotionally, physically. I had no idea how long this would take or how much it would cost, but I knew that I had to do this. It was no longer about just claiming the penthouse. It was about reclaiming my life. The penthouse was only a symbol. I wasn't just fighting for the property. I was fighting for my identity, my dignity, and my future. The court date loomed ahead, and with each passing day, I felt more nervous and determined. I was going to stand in front of that judge and tell them my story. I wasn't going to let Daniel's family take what was rightfully mine without a fight. I didn't care how much power they had or how deep their pockets went. I was ready to take this battle to the very end. But deep inside, I knew that this was only the beginning. The fight for my penthouse would soon become the fight of my life. The days leading up to the court hearing felt like an eternity. My mind was a constant swirl of emotions: anger, sadness, determination. But through it all, I held on to the one thing that mattered. I wasn't going to back down. I had come too far, fought too hard to give up now. Ethan had been a steady presence in my life during these dark times. He worked tirelessly on my case, gathering evidence, reviewing documents, preparing me for what I would face in court. His support was invaluable, and honestly, it made all the difference. He wasn't just my lawyer anymore. He was my rock. And through everything, I began to realize something. I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting for me. I was fighting for my life, my future. The day of the hearing arrived, and I barely slept the night before. I was up early, going over my notes one last time, mentally preparing myself for what was about to come. I had to remain calm, focused. There would be no room for doubt. I stepped into the courtroom with my head held high, trying to project confidence, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't help but glance around the room. There was Daniel, sitting with his family, his face a cold mask of indifference. My breath caught in my throat. How could he sit there so detached while his family had done all this to me? I thought I knew him, but the man I saw sitting there was a stranger. Eva and Claire were sitting beside him, their expressions twisted with resentment and arrogance. I could feel their eyes on me, their silent judgment. But I refused to let them intimidate me. This wasn't about them. This was about me and my right to stand up for what was mine. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my legs shaky but my voice steady. I told the court everything. The way Daniel's family had forced me out of my penthouse, the forged documents they had presented, the lies they had spread. I described in detail the day they had stormed into my home, how they had thrown my belongings out onto the street, and how Daniel had stood by, silent and unhelpful. Your Honor, I said, my voice trembling but determined, I have lived in that penthouse my entire life. It is not just a property, it is a part of me. It's filled with the memories of my parents, of everything I've lost. I refuse to let anyone take it from me. The silence in the room was deafening as I spoke. I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. And then I turned to Daniel. I locked eyes with him, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his gaze. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't remorse. It was fear. He was scared, not of the consequences of his actions, but of losing me. But it was too late for that. As I finished my statement, I glanced over at Aiden, who gave me a small but reassuring nod. I knew I had done my best. The rest was in the hands of the judge. The judge's eyes never left me as I finished my testimony. He asked a few questions, then turned to Daniel and his family. The look on their faces was a mix of frustration and anger. They knew they had no leg to stand on. The evidence was clear, the documents were forged, and they had no claim to the penthouse. And then the judge spoke the words I had been waiting for, the words that would change my life forever. After reviewing the evidence presented, the judge said, "I hereby declare that Kara is the rightful owner of the penthouse. The claims made by Daniel's family are false, and the documents provided were fraudulent." My heart leaped in my chest. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I had won. The penthouse was mine. But the next part of the judge's ruling sent a chill down my spine. As for Daniel, the judge continued, he is found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and attempting to illegally seize property. Based on the severity of these crimes, I am sentencing him to a long prison term. I didn't feel victorious in that moment. I felt hollow, like I had lost something irreplaceable. But I also felt something else, relief. The battle was over. For the first time in months, I could finally breathe. As I left the courtroom, Ethan was by my side, his presence grounding me. I had reclaimed my life, but it had come at a heavy price. Daniel's betrayal still stung, and the man I once loved was now facing the consequences of his actions. But I had won. I had taken control of my life again. It wasn't the end of the road, though. I knew that I had a long way to go before I could fully heal, before I could truly move on. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could. It wasn't over, not yet. The judgment was delivered, and the case was settled, but my journey of healing had just begun. As I walked out of that courthouse, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. I had fought. I had won. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But there was something else beneath the surface. A profound emptiness. The life I had once dreamed of with Daniel was gone. I couldn't deny it, no matter how much I had hoped to rebuild that connection. The truth was undeniable. Daniel was gone. I was done. The man I had loved, the man I had shared my life with, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. He had sided with his family, letting them take what was mine, and remained silent when I needed him most. The silence in the courtroom, his lack of remorse, his detachment, it told me everything I needed to know. But in that emptiness, something powerful began to grow. I was no longer just a victim. I wasn't the woman who had been forced into the car and left on a bridge, abandoned by the people I trusted. I had taken control of my life. I had reclaimed my penthouse. I had stood up for myself when everyone else turned away. I decided to focus on what mattered. I had a future to rebuild, and I wasn't going to let anyone or anything stand in my way. The penthouse, once a symbol of betrayal, was now my sanctuary. Slowly but surely, I began to renovate, transforming it into a place that was truly mine. I hired contractors, reimagined each room, and added touches that reflected who I was now. Strong, independent, and ready for whatever came next. The place began to feel like home again. A safe space where I could heal, where I could be myself. Throughout all of this, Ethan was by my side. He had helped me fight this battle from the very beginning. But somewhere along the way, something else had blossomed between us. His support, his unwavering belief in me, it went beyond just the legal case. We spent more time together, talking late into the night, sharing stories of our past and hopes for the future. And in those quiet moments, I realized something important. I wasn't alone anymore. I had found a true partner in Nathan. It wasn't just about gratitude anymore. I had started to care for him deeply, and it was clear that he felt the same way. The connection we shared grew stronger, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. I felt like I could finally be happy for the first time in a long time. Not only for myself, but also with a person who genuinely got me. I had not felt at ease in a long time until one evening when we sat together on the penthouse's balcony and gazed out at the city lights. It was not only my stuff that I had regained. I had regained my sense of self, my dignity, and my future. And there was Ethan, who had supported me the entire time. Not only as my attorney, but also as the man I had fallen in love with. Ethan and I came to a choice that would alter everything as the penthouse's renovations came to an end. We were married. Our house was now in the spot that had previously felt like a battlefield and was tainted with memories of treachery. A representation of fortitude, affection, and the ability to conquer every challenge life presents. I was really happy when I looked out at the skyline that night. I had experienced betrayal, but I had recovered from it with greater strength. Even though my journey was far from done, I was confident that Ethan and I could handle whatever lay ahead. No one could ever take away from me the ability